The rain was coming down in sheets, drumming against the windshield as Ethan Cole squinted through the blur of his wipers. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, hummed softly in the back seat, clutching her stuffed bunny. They were heading home from a late-night grocery run, their small-town pickup rumbling down the empty country road. And then he saw her, a woman in a white wedding dress, soaked, shivering, and sitting in a wheelchair by the side of the road. The sight made Ethan hit the brakes so hard the tires screeched. "Daddy, is that a princess?" Lily asked, peering through the window. For a moment, Ethan thought it might be some kind of movie shoot or prank. But when he saw the mud splattered up her gown and the way she hugged herself against the cold, instinct took over. He pulled over, grabbed his jacket, and ran through the rain. "Hey, are you okay?" he shouted over the storm. The woman lifted her face. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her hair plastered to her forehead. Her voice trembled. He left me." Ethan blinked. "Who did?" "My groom," she whispered, her eyes glistening. He drove away right after the ceremony." For a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. He could barely process the image. This beautiful woman in a designer gown, abandoned on a back road, her wheelchair half sunk in the mud. "Let's get you out of the rain," he said firmly. "You'll catch your death out here." He lifted her carefully. She was light, almost fragile, and carried her to his truck. Lily moved aside without a word, wrapping her bunny around the woman's shoulders as if she already knew what kindness was needed. Inside the truck, the woman stared out the window, silent. Ethan handed her a blanket and turned up the heater. "I'm Ethan. This is my daughter, Lily," he said gently. "I'm Claire," she murmured, her voice soft but controlled. "Claire Whitmore." Ethan blinked. The name sounded familiar, like he'd read it somewhere, but he brushed it off. "Claire, do you have somewhere I can take you? Family? Friends?" She hesitated. "Not tonight," she said quietly. "I don't want to see anyone." He nodded slowly. "All right. You can stay at our place for the night. It's small, but it's dry." Ethan's home was humble, a 2-bedroom farmhouse at the edge of town. He made her tea while Lily proudly showed off her drawings on the fridge. When Claire's wheelchair rolled over the creaky wooden floor, the house felt strangely alive, like it hadn't held another adult presence in years. Ethan was a single dad. His wife Amy had passed away when Lily was just a baby. Since then, every day had been about work, parenting, and survival. No surprises, no glamour, just life. That night after Lily went to bed, Claire sat quietly by the fire, staring at the flames. Her hands trembled slightly, and Ethan noticed how she tried to hide it. "I should thank you," she said finally. "You didn't have to stop," he shrugged. "Wouldn't have been right not to." She looked at him then, really looked. "You're different," she said softly. "Most people would have just driven by." He smiled faintly. "Guess I'm not most people." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. Lily was already sitting beside Claire, helping her brush out her tangled hair. Ethan cooked breakfast, pancakes a little burnt around the edges, and tried not to stare. The woman at his table didn't look like the broken bride he'd picked up last night. She looked calm, grateful, but something about her story didn't add up. "Claire, if you don't mind me asking, what really happened last night?" She paused, setting down her coffee cup. "He married me for the wrong reasons," she said slowly. "He thought I was fragile. A project, someone he could fix or control. When he realized I wasn't, he left." Ethan frowned. "That's cruel." She smiled faintly. "It's life." There was silence, broken only by Lily's giggle as syrup dripped down her chin. Then Claire added softly, "You remind me of someone I used to know, someone who still believed in decency." Ethan chuckled. "That's a rare compliment these days." Over the next few days, Claire stayed longer than she planned. The storm had flooded the main road, and she insisted she didn't mind helping around the house. Ethan found her one afternoon outside, potting flowers in the garden with Lily. Her laughter, light, effortless, filled the air. He realized then how long it had been since his home had known that sound. At night, they talked. She told him she'd once been an architect, that she'd lost her mobility after an accident years ago, and that rebuilding her life had been the hardest thing she'd ever done. But what she didn't tell him, what she hid carefully, was that she was Claire Whitmore, heiress to the Whitmore Industries empire, one of the wealthiest women in the state. She didn't want his kindness to turn into pity. She just wanted to be seen as human. One evening, while fixing a broken fence post outside, Ethan noticed a sleek black car pull up to the gate. Two men in suits stepped out. "Mr. Cole?" one of them asked. Ethan nodded warily. "We're looking for Ms. Claire Whitmore. She's been missing for 3 days. Her family's very worried." Ethan's jaw dropped. "Her family?" Before he could say more, Claire appeared at the door, pale and silent. The men hurried toward her, their tone shifting instantly to reverence. "Ms. Whitmore, your father's been beside himself." "The wedding?" She raised a hand. "Enough," she said firmly. "I'll go home when I'm ready." The men exchanged looks but backed off. Ethan stared at her, stunned. "You're that Claire Whitmore?" She looked at him, eyes full of apology. "I didn't want you to treat me differently." He said nothing, just nodded slowly, a mix of confusion and admiration twisting in his chest. That night she wheeled up beside him on the porch. The moonlight painted her face in silver. "I should go back tomorrow," she said softly. "There's a lot to face." Ethan nodded. "Guess this is goodbye then." She smiled sadly. "Maybe not forever." There was a pause. Then she reached out, her hand finding his. "You reminded me there's still good in the world, Ethan. You and your little girl. You saved me in more ways than one." He squeezed her hand gently. "You didn't need saving, Claire. Just someone to believe in you again." A year later, Ethan's hardware shop had a new sign above the door, Cole and Whitmore Restorations. It turned out that after leaving that night, Claire had used her influence and wealth to help him expand his small-town business. But she didn't stop there. She'd come back again and again until the quiet friendship grew into something deeper. And one sunny afternoon, as Lily ran through the wildflowers outside their newly built home, Claire sat beside Ethan on the porch, her wheelchair gleaming in the light. "You know," he said with a smile, "you never did tell me what made you stop on that road." She laughed softly. Maybe fate thought it was your turn to be rescued. He looked at her then, this woman who had everything money could buy, but still chose the man who had nothing but kindness to give, and he realized she'd changed his life more than he'd ever changed hers. Sometimes the richest hearts belong to those who've lost the most, and the greatest rescues aren't about saving someone else, but finding yourself in the process. The following morning, sunlight spilled across the porch, catching on the wildflowers that Lily had insisted on planting along the fence. Ethan sipped his coffee while Claire wheeled herself beside him, her fingers brushing over the wooden railing. "You ever think about how small moments change everything?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled, eyes on Lily chasing a butterfly across the yard. "All the time. Like stopping that night. Never thought pulling over would end up here." Claire nodded. "Neither did I. Funny how life works. Sometimes you meet someone and everything else just fades into the background." They shared a quiet laugh, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known since his wife passed. He realized that saving Claire hadn't just been an act of kindness. It had been a catalyst for the family he'd always wanted, but didn't know he could have again. Over the next weeks, Claire became a part of their daily routine. She helped Lily with homework, taught her new words, and sometimes even baked cookies together. Her presence brought light into the small farmhouse, but it also reminded Ethan of something he'd almost forgotten: hope. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the porch, Claire turned to Ethan, her eyes glimmering with quiet determination. "You know, I always thought wealth and success could buy happiness. But watching you, seeing how you care for Lily, I finally understand that real richness comes from love and kindness. That's something money can't touch." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "I never thought someone like you would say that to someone like me." She reached over and took his hand again. "Maybe we're not so different. Maybe we just needed the right moment to see it." Lily ran over with her arms full of dandelions, laughing as she offered them to Claire. Claire accepted them with a smile, placing them in a small jar she set on the porch railing. It was simple, ordinary, but somehow perfect. Months passed and the bond between them grew deeper. Business flourished, friendships blossomed, and the farmhouse became a home filled with laughter, warmth, and shared dreams. Ethan realized that Claire's presence hadn't just changed his life, it had reshaped it in ways he never imagined. Then came the day Claire invited Ethan to her office in the city. He had expected some formal announcement or corporate transaction, but what awaited him was far just